Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you enjoyed the lovely violin music you just heard. It was performed by Rowan Gemma, and we would like to welcome you to the next installment of our ongoing series of monthly readings of literature by our local theater ensemble, The Edge. But before we begin our program, here is a word from our sponsor. No.
What's the matter now?
Here we go again. What is it tonight?
Well, it always seems like something's gone wrong, and today it's Brian's gone wrong. Has anyone seen him? We go on the air in a few minutes.
Brian?
No, I haven't seen him at all.
Yeah, maybe he was kidnapped.
Oh, but you know, it's strange. I saw him go into the Speckled Pub about an hour ago, and I followed him in there and thought we could have a drink before the broadcast. But when I went in, he wasn't there.
He wasn't there?
No.
You mean you didn't see him anywhere?
Any place.
Oh, maybe he was just feeling a little shy and he went out the back to get away from you.
I wouldn't be surprised.
Well, there's nothing for it. Liz, you'll have to read his part.
I don't know, wait a minute, he plays Sherlock, I can't do that.
Well, it's too late to get Basil Rathbone.
Where do you suppose he is?
Well, I don't know. This isn't like Brian at all. He would never leave us in the lurch. He just disappeared.
Well, there's nothing we can do. Everybody, places. Oh, I've made some changes in your scripts. This weekend, we are doing something a little bit different. Our program this month has two parts. The first part of our program aired Thursday evening, and the second part aired last evening. This afternoon, WEDG is pleased to again present the second part of our program, Not According to Doyle, 4 radio plays adapted from Sherlock Holmes pastiches. By the way, a pastiche is a term used when an artistic work imitates the style of another work, and in this case, it refers to stories written by authors other than Arthur Conan Doyle that feature Sherlock Holmes, or a Sherlock-type character. Hence our title, Not According to Doyle. Since he was created by Arthur Conan Doyle in 1887, Sherlock Holmes has become the most popular fictional detective of all time, and as such has spawned a host of pastiches. Now, before we begin tonight's program, here are some jingles.
Is your upset stomach stopping you from enjoying the show? Try Alka-Seltzer.
You worked too hard. You ate too much. The cheesecake made you greedy. Let your aching head and stomach hear this message from Old Speedy.
Alka-Seltzer, plop, plop, fizz, fizz, oh, what a relief it is.
Those speedy bubbles burst into action to relieve your upset stomach and headache fast. For acid indigestion alone, Alka-Seltzer Gold, and use only as directed.
Oh, what a relief it is. What a relief. All aboard the Good and Plenty train. Once upon a time there was an engineer. Choo-choo Charlie was his name, we hear. He had an engine and he sure had fun. He used good and plenty candy to make the train run. Charlie says,
Love my good and plenty.
Charlie says,
Really rings my bell.
Charlie says,
Love my good and plenty. Don't know any other candy that I love so well.
Are cleaning chores getting too heavy? Mr. Clean can help lighten the load. Mr. Clean gets rid of dirt and grime and grease in just a minute.
Mr. Clean will clean your whole house and everything that's in it.
Floors, doors, walls, halls, sidewall tires, and old golf balls.
Sinks, stoves, tops he'll do. He'll even help do laundry too.
Mr. Clean gets rid of dirt and grime and grease in just a minute.
Mr. Clean will clean your whole house and everything that's in it.
Mr. Clean, Mr. Clean.
Mr. Clean.
We hope you enjoyed those jingles from our sponsors. And now onto our program. The first pastiche we are presenting this afternoon is The Unique Hamlet by Vincent Starrett. Vincent Starrett wrote several well-known Sherlock Holmes pastiches, including The Private Life of Sherlock Holmes and his Sherlockian poem 221B. His The Adventure of the Unique Hamlet, considered by many to be the finest Sherlock pastiche, pokes fun at book collectors. This afternoon, the part of Sherlock Holmes is being played by our own station manager, that's moi, Damien Licata. Dr. Watson is being played by Meg Kupiak.
Good afternoon.
The part of Harrington Edwards by Eric Bell.
A pleasure indeed.
Sir Nathaniel Brooke Bannerman by Tom Bernstock.
How do you do?
And The Maid by Liz Pannerton.
Howdy, y'all.
Now, sit back and enjoy the adventure of the unique Hamlet.
As I stood in our bay window at 221B Baker Street one glorious spring morning, looking idly into the street, I beheld a most peculiar sight, which moved me to exclaim to Holmes, "Holmes, surely here comes a madman. Someone has incautiously left the door open and the poor fellow has slipped out. What a pity." My friend and fellow lodger, Sherlock Holmes, rose lazily from the wicker rocker in which he had been lounging and came to my side to see what had excited me.
Ah, a singular personage indeed. He is loping like a tired hound, very unwise for a man of his age and bulk.
What under heaven can ail him? See how he looks so desperately at the houses as he passes.
He is looking at the numbers, and I fancy it is ours that will bring him the greatest happiness. His profession, of course, is obvious.
A banker, I imagine, or at least a person of affluence, judging from his gold watch chain and silk top hat.
Affluent, yes, but not exactly a banker, Watson. Notice the sagging pockets, despite the excellence of his clothing, and the rather exaggerated madness of his eye. He is a collector, or I am very much mistaken.
My dear fellow, at his age and in his station? And why would he be seeking us when we settled that last bill?
Of books, Watson. He is a professional book collector. His line is Cactons, Elsevier's, Gutenberg Bibles, folios, not the sordid reminders of unpaid grocery accounts and tobacconist debts. See, he is turning in here, as I expected, and in a moment he will stand upon our hearthrug and tell us the harrowing tale of a unique volume and its extraordinary disappearance.
The door burst violently inward, and the subject of our analysis staggered to the center of the room, and without announcing his attention by word or sign, pitched head foremost onto our center rug. And there he lay, a magnificent ruin. Holmes quickly ran for the brandy bottle, while I knelt beside the stricken mountain of flesh and loosened the wilted neckband. Finally, he sat up in a groggy fashion, passed a dazed hand across his eyes, and scrambled to his feet.
Sir, forgive me,
That's quite all right, Mr. Harrington Edwards. Be quite calm, my dear sir. And when you have recovered your composure, you will find us ready to listen to your story.
Holmes' eyes were gleaming, and he rubbed his hands together in profound satisfaction. I could not but hope that his conjecture was correct, for he had had little to occupy his mind for some weeks, and I lived in constant fear that he would seek that stimulation his active brain required in the long-tabooed cocaine bottle.
you know me then?
I'd never heard of you until this moment. But if you wish to conceal your identity, it would be well for you to leave your book plates at home. These folded paper slips fell from your hat when you had the misfortune to tumble. I merely picked them up and was able to read your name.
Yes. I remember now. My hat was a little large, and I folded a number of them and placed them beneath the sweatband. I had forgotten.
Rather shabby usage for a handsome etched plate, but that's your affair. And now, sir, if you are quite at ease, let us hear what it is that brought you, a collector of books from Polk Sturgis Manor. The name is on the plate. To this office of Mr. Sherlock Holmes, consulting expert in crime. Surely nothing but the theft of Muhammad's own copy of the Koran can have affected you so amazingly.
Oh, alas, if that were all it were. But I shall begin at the beginning. You must know, then, that I am the greatest Shakespearean commentator in the world, Mr. Holmes. My collection of honor is unrivaled, and much of the world's collection, and consequently its knowledge of the true Shakespeare, has emanated from my pen. But one book I did not possess. It was unique in the correct sense of that abused word. It was the greatest Shakespeare rarity in the world. Few knew that it existed, for its existence was kept a profound secret among a chosen few. Had it become known that this book was in England, any place indeed, its owner would have been hounded to his grave by American millionaire collectors.
Heavens, this is astonishing. Who possesses such a book?
Well, it was in the possession of my friend. I tell you this in the strictest confidence, as between advisor and client, of my friend, Sir Nathaniel Brooke Bannerman, whose place at Walton on Walton is next to my own. A scant 200 yards separate our dwellings, and so intimate has been our friendship that a few years ago the fence between our estates was removed, and each of us roamed or loitered at will about the other's preserves. For some years now, I have been at work on my greatest book, my magnum opus. It was also to be my last book, embodying the results of a lifetime of study and research. Sir, I know Elizabethan London better than any man alive, better than any man who ever lived. I sometimes think.
Our visitor suddenly burst into tears, so great was his agitation.
There, do not be distressed. It is my business to help people who are unhappy by reason of losses. Be assured, I shall help you. Pray continue with your interesting narrative. What was this book, which I take it in some manner has disappeared? You borrowed it from a friend?
That was what I was coming to. But as for help, Mr. Holmes, I fear that it is beyond even you. Yet, as a court of last resort, I came to you ignoring all intermediate agencies. Let me resume then. As you may have surmised, I needed this book, knowing its value, which could not be fixed, for the book is priceless. And knowing Sir Nathaniel's idolatry of it, I hesitated long before asking the loan of it. But I had to have it, for without it, my work could not be completed. And at length, I made the request. I suggested that I go to his home, go through the volume under his own eyes, he sitting at my side throughout the entire examination, and servants stationed at every door and window with fowling pieces in their hands. Well, you can imagine my astonishment when Sir Nathaniel laughed at my suggested precautions. "My dear Edwards," he said, "that would be all very well were you Arthur Bainbridge or Sir Homer Nantes," mentioning the two great men of the British Museum. Or were you Mr. Henry Hutterson, the American railroad magnate? But you are my friend, Edwards, and you shall take the book home with you for as long as you like. I protested vigorously, I assure you, but he would have it so. And as I was touched by this mark of his esteem, at length I permitted him to have it his own way. My God, if I had remained adamant, if I had only...
He broke off for a moment and stared fixedly into space.
Come, Mr. Edwards, you are agitating yourself unduly, and you are unreasonably prolonging our curiosity. You have not yet told us what the book is.
Oh, I beg your pardon, gentlemen. The book was a Hamlet quarto, dated 1602, presented by Shakespeare to his friend Drayton, with an inscription, 4 lines in length, written and signed by the master himself.
My dear sir!
It is true. That is the book I borrowed, and that is the book I lost. The long-sought quarto of 1602, actually inscribed in Shakespeare's own hand, his greatest drama, in an edition dated a year earlier than any that is known, a perfect copy, and with 4 lines in his handwriting. Unique, extraordinary, amazing, astounding, colossal, incredible,
Well, I appreciate your emotion, Mr. Edwards. The book is indeed all that you say it is. Indeed, it is so important that we must at once attack the problem of rediscovering it. Compose yourself, my dear sir, and tell us of the loss. The book, I take it, is readily identifiable?
Oh, Mr. Holmes, it would be impossible to hide it. It is so important a volume that, upon coming into possession of it, Sir Nathaniel Brooke Bannerman called a consultation of the greatest binders of the empire, at which were present Mr. Revere, Messrs. Sangorsky and Sutcliffe, Mr. Zansdorf, and others. They and myself and 2 others alone knew of the book's existence. When I tell you that it is bound in brown Levant Morocco, a super extra with leather joints, brown Levant doublers and fly leaves, the whole elaborately gold-tooled, inlaid with 750 separate pieces of various colored leathers, and enriched by the insertion of 82 precious stones. I need not add that it is a design that will never be duplicated, and I tell you only a few of its glories. The binding was personally done by Messrs. Revere, Sangorsky, Sutcliffe, and Zandorf, working alternately, and is such a work of enchantment that any man might gladly die 1,000 deaths for the privilege of owning it for but 5 minutes.
Dear me, it must indeed be a handsome volume. And from your description, together with a realization of its importance by reason of its association, I gather that it is something beyond what might be termed a valuable book.
It is priceless. The combined wealth of India, Morocco, Mexico, the Wall Street would be too little for its purchase.
You are anxious to recover this book?
My God, are you supposing that
Tut, tut. I was only testing you. It is a book that might move even you, Mr. Harrington Edwards, to theft. But we may put aside that notion at once. Your emotion is too sincere, and besides, you know too well the difficulties of hiding such a volume as you describe. Indeed, only a very daring man would purloin it and keep it long in his possession. Pray, tell us how you came to suffer it to be lost.
Mr. Harrington Edwards seized the brandy flask which stood at his elbow and drained it at a gulp. With the renewed strength thus obtained, he continued his story.
As I have said, Sir Nathaniel forced me to accept the loan of the book, much against my own wishes. On the evening that I called for it, he told me that 2 of his trusted servants, heavily armed, would accompany me across the grounds to my home. "There is no danger," he said, "but you will feel better." And I heartily agreed with him. How shall I tell you what happened, Mr. Holmes? It was those very servants who assailed me and robbed me of my precious borrowing.
Splendid! It is a case after my own heart. Watson, these are deep waters we are sailing. But you are rather lengthy about this, Mr. Edwards. Perhaps it would help matters if I asked you a few questions.
Oh, certainly, sir. By all means.
By what road did you go to your home?
Oh, by the main road, a good highway which lies in front of our estates. I preferred it to the shadows of the wood.
And there were some 200 yards between your doors. At what point did the assault occur?
Almost midway between the 2 entrance drives, I should say.
There was no light.
That of the moon only.
Did you know these servants who accompanied you?
Well, one I knew slightly. The other I had not seen before.
Describe them to me, please.
The man who is known to me is called Miles. He is clean-shaven, short and powerful, although somewhat elderly. He was known, I believe, as Sir Nathaniel's most trusted servant. He had been with Sir Nathaniel for years. I cannot describe him minutely, for of course I never paid him much attention. He was a servant after all, but the other was tall, thick-set, wore a heavy beard. He was a silent fellow. I do not believe he spoke a word during the journey.
And Miles was more communicative?
Oh, yes. Even garrulous, perhaps. He talked about the weather and the moon, and I forget what all.
And never about books?
Oh, there was no mention of books between any of us.
Just how did this attack occur?
Oh, it was very sudden. We had reached, as I say, about the halfway point, when the big man seized me by the throat, to prevent outcry, I suppose, and on the instant, Miles snatched the volume from my grasp and was off. In a moment, his companion followed him. I had been half throttled and could not immediately cry out. When I could articulate, I made the countryside ring with my cries. I ran after them, but failed even to catch another sight of them. They had disappeared completely.
Did you all leave the house together?
Oh, Miles and I left together. The second man joined us at the porter's lodge. He had been attending to some of his duties.
And Sir Nathaniel, where was he?
Oh, he said good night on the threshold.
What is he to say about all this?
Oh, I have not told him.
You have not told him?
I have not dared. It will kill him. That book was the breath of his life.
When did this occur?
Excellent, Watson. I was about to ask the very same question.
Oh, just last night. I was crazy most of the night. I didn't sleep a wink. I came to you the first thing this morning. Indeed, I tried to raise you on the telephone last night, but could not establish a connection.
Yes, we were attending Madame Trontini's first night. You remember, Watson, we dined later at Albani's.
Oh, Mr. Holmes, do you think you can help me?
I trust so, my dear sir. Indeed, I am certain that I can. At any rate, I shall make a gallant attempt with Watson's aid. Such a book, as you remark, is not easily hidden. What say you, Watson, to a run down to Walton on Walton?
Oh, well, there's a train in half an hour. Will you return with me?
No, that would never do. We must not be seen together just yet, Mr. Edwards. Go back yourself on the first train, by all means, unless you have further business in London. My friend and I will go together. There is another train this morning.
Oh, yes. 1 hour later.
Excellent. Until we meet, then.
We took the train from Paddington Station an hour later, as we had promised, and began the journey to Walton-on-Walton, a pleasant, aristocratic village. Holmes, lying back in his seat, blew earnest smoke rings at the ceiling of our compartment, which fortunately was empty, while I devoted myself to the morning paper. After a bit, I tired of this occupation and turned to Holmes. I was surprised to find him looking out the window, wreathed in smiles, and quoting Hafiz softly under his breath. You have a theory, Holmes?
It is a capital mistake to theorize in advance of the evidence, Watson. Still, I have given some thought to the interesting problem of our friend, Mr. Harrington Edwards, and there are several indications which can point to only one conclusion.
And whom do you believe to be the thief?
My dear fellow, you forget. We already know the thief. Edwards has testified quite clearly that it was Miles who snatched the volume.
True, I had forgotten. All we must do then is find Miles.
Yes, and a motive. What would you say, Watson, was the motive in this case?
Jealousy.
You surprised me.
Miles had been bribed by a rival collector who in some manner had learned about this remarkable volume. Remember, Edwards told us the second man joined them at the lodge. That would give an excellent opportunity for the substitution of a man other than the servant intended by Sir Nathaniel. Is that not good reasoning?
You surpass yourself, my dear Watson. It is excellently reasoned. And as you justly observe, the opportunity for a substitution was perfect.
Do you not agree with me?
Hardly, Watson. A rival collector, in order to accomplish this remarkable coup, first would have to have known of the volume, as you suggest, but also he must have known what night Mr. Harrington Edwards would go to Sir Nathaniel's to get it, which would point to collaboration on the part of our client. As a matter of fact, however, Mr. Edwards' decision as to his acceptance of the loan was, I believe, sudden and without previous determination.
I do not recall his saying so.
He did not say so, but it is a simple deduction. A book collector is mad enough to begin with, Watson, but tempt him with some such bait as this Shakespeare quarto, and he is bereft of all sanity. Mr. Edwards would not have been able to wait. It was just the night before that Sir Nathaniel promised him the book, and it was just last night that he flew to accept the offer, flying, incidentally, to disaster also. The miracle is that he was able to wait for an entire day.
Oh, wonderful.
Elementary, my dear fellow. I have employed one of the earliest and best-known principles of my craft only. If you are interested in the process, you will do well to read Harley Graham on transcendental emotion. I have myself been guilty of a small brochure in which I catalogued some 1,200 professions and the emotional effect upon their members of unusual tidings, good and bad.
We were the only passengers to alight at Walton-on-Walton, but rapid inquiry revealed that Mr. Harrington Edwards had returned on the previous train. Holmes had disguised himself before leaving the train. He wore his cap peaked backwards, carried a pencil behind his ear, and had turned up the bottoms of his trousers. From one pocket dangled the end of a linen tape measure. He was a municipal surveyor to the life. I could not but think that, meeting him suddenly on the road, I myself would not have known him. At his suggestion, I dented the crown of my derby hat and turned my coat inside out. Then he gave me an end of the tape measure, while he, carrying the other, went on ahead. In this fashion, stopping from time to kneel in the dust and ostensibly to measure sections of the roadway, we proceeded to Folkestoges Manor. The occasional villagers we encountered paid us no more attention than if we had been rabbits. Shortly, we came into the sight of our friend's dwelling, a picturesque and rambling abode sitting far back in its own grounds and bordered by a square of sentinel oaks. A gravel pathway led from the roadway to the house entrance, and as we passed, the sunlight struck glancing rays from the antique brass knocker on the door. The whole picture, with its background of gleaming countryside, was one of rural comfort and calm.
We shall not enter yet, but we shall endeavor to be back in time for luncheon.
From this point, the road progressed downward in a gentle incline, and the trees were thicker on either side of the road. Holmes kept his eyes stolidly on the path before us, and when we had covered about 100 yards, he stopped and pointed.
Here is where the assault occurred.
I'm looking, Holmes, but I see no sign of a struggle.
You recall it was midway between the two houses that it happened? No, there are few signs. There was no violent tussle. Fortunately, however, we had our proverbial fall of rain last evening, and the earth has retained impressions nicely. If you kneel and look closer, Watson, you can see, here, the faint imprint of a foot, and another, and another.
Yes, by Jove, you're right, Holmes. I see now, indeed, many feet have passed along the road. Holmes flung himself at full length in the dirt and wriggled about, his nose to the earth, muttering rapidly in French. Then he whipped out a glass, the better to examine a mark that had caught his eye. But in a moment he shook his head in disappointment and continued with his examination. I was irresistibly reminded of a noble hound, at fault, sniffing in circles in an effort to reestablish the lost scent. In a moment, however, he had it, for with a little cry of pleasure, he ran to his feet, zigzagged curiously across the road, and paused before a hedge, a lean finger pointing accusingly at a break in the thicket.
Here, Watson! No wonder they disappeared. Edwards thought they continued up the road, but here is where they broke through the hedge.
Then, stepping back a little distance, Holmes ran lightly forward and cleared the hedge at a bound, alighting on his hands on the other side.
Follow me carefully, Watson, for we must not allow our footprints to confuse us.
I fell more heavily than my companion, but in a moment he had me by the heels and helped me to steady myself. He lowered his face to the earth, and deep in the mud and grass, I saw the prints of 2 pairs of feet.
You see, a small man broke through, but the larger rascal leaped over the hedge. See how deeply his prints are marked. He landed heavily here in the soft ooze. It is very significant, Watson, that he came this way. Does it suggest nothing to you?
That they were the men who knew Edwards' grounds as well as the Brooke Bannerman estate. Holmes lowered himself to his stomach without further conversation, and for some moments we crawled painfully across the grass. Then a shocking thought came to me. Holmes, you see where these footprints tend. They are directed toward the home of our client, Mr. Harrington Edwards.
Yes, Watson. Indeed, this double line of impressions ends abruptly at the back door of Polk Sturgis Manor. And I see by my watch that we are just in time for luncheon.
And Holmes then immediately knocked on the door, and in a matter of minutes, we were in the presence of our client, Mr. Harrington Edwards.
Dr. Watson and I have been roaming about the neighborhood and took the liberty of coming to your rear entrance.
You have a clue?
Indeed, I believe we have solved your little problem, Mr. Harrington Edwards.
Oh, my dear sir.
I have to establish a motive, but as to the main facts, there can be no question.
The book. Tell me.
Patience, my good sir. We have had nothing to eat since sunup and are famished. All in good time. Let us first dine, and then all shall be made clear. Meanwhile, I should like to telephone to Sir Nathaniel Brooke Bannerman, for I wish him to hear what I have to say.
Oh, Mr. Holmes, please. I beg you, not a word to him. No. I cannot permit this. No.
But our client's pleas were in vain. Holmes would have his little joke and his luncheon. In the end, Mr. Harrington Edwards staggered away to the kitchen to order a repast, and Holmes talked rapidly and unintelligibly into the telephone for a moment and came back with a smile on his face, which to me boded ill for someone. But I asked no questions. In good time, this amazing man would tell his story in his own way. I had heard he had heard and seen all he had seen, yet I was completely at sea. I must say, I felt sorry for our haggard and nervous host, who ate slowly and with apparent discomfort, his eyes continually on Holmes' inscrutable face. When the sorry meal was concluded, we went into the library, where Holmes took possession of the big easy chair with an air of proprietorship, which would have been amusing in other circumstances. He screwed together his long pipe and lighted it with a malicious lack of haste, while Mr. Harrington Edwards perspired against the mantel in an agony of apprehension.
Oh, why must you keep us waiting, Mr. Holmes? Tell us at once, please. Who?
Well, the criminal is...
Sir Nathaniel Brooke Bannerman.
On the heels of the maid's announcement, in stalked the handsome baronet, whose priceless volume had caused all this stir and unhappiness.
I have been much upset by your call, Mr. Holmes. You say you have something to tell me about the quarto. Don't say that anything has happened to it.
Oh, Mr. Holmes, why did you send for him?
Because I wish him to hear the truth about the Shakespeare quarto. Sir Nathaniel, I believe you have not told us as yet that Mr. Edwards was robbed last night of your precious volume. Robbed by the trusted servants whom you sent with him to protect.
What? Good God! Good God!
I should have thought you would have been suspicious of evil when your servants did not return.
I have not seen them. I do not mingle with my servants. I did not know that they had failed to return. But tell me all.
Mr. Edwards, would you repeat your story, please?
Mr. Harrington Edwards, thus adjured, told the unhappy tale again.
Oh, Sir Nathaniel, can you ever forgive me?
I don't know that it was entirely your fault. Sir Nathaniel's own servants are the guilty ones, and surely he sent them with you.
But you said you had solved the case, Mr. Holmes.
Yes, it is solved. You have had the clue in your own hands ever since the occurrence, but you did not know how to use it. In all, it all turns upon the curious actions of the taller servant prior to the assault.
The actions of... why, he did nothing, said nothing.
Precisely. That is the curious circumstance.
Mr. Holmes, this has upset me more than I can tell you. Spare no pains to recover the book and to bring to justice the scoundrels who stole it. But I must go away and think.
Stay. I have already caught one of them.
What?
Where?
Here. You, Sir Nathaniel, were the taller servant. You were the one of the thieves who throttled Mr. Harrington Edwards and took from him your own book. And now, sir, will you tell us why you did it?
What? What do you mean?
Come, sir. Or will it make it easier for you if I tell the story as it occurred? Let it be so, then. You parted with Mr. Harrington Edwards on your doorsill, Sir Nathaniel, bidding your best friend good night with a smile on your lips and evil in your heart. As soon as you had closed the door, you slipped into an enveloping raincoat, turned up your collar, and hastened by a shorter road to the porter's lodge, where you joined Mr. Edwards and Miles as one of your own servants. You spoke not a word at any time because you feared to speak. You were afraid Mr. Edwards would recognize your voice, while your beard, hastily assumed, protected your face, and in the darkness your figure passed unnoticed. Having choked and robbed your best friend then of your own book, you and your scoundrelly assistant fled across Mr. Edwards' field to his own back door, thinking that if investigation followed, I would be called in and would trace those footprints and fix the crime upon Mr. Harrington Edwards as part of a criminal plan prearranged with your rascally servants, who would be supposed to be in the pay of Mr. Edwards, and the ringleaders in a counterfeit assault upon his person.
That's preposterous, sir. How could you possibly know that?
Your mistake, sir, was in ending your trail abruptly at Mr. Edwards' back door. Had you left another trail then, leading back to your own domicile, I would unhesitatingly have arrested Mr. Harrington Edwards for the theft. Surely you must know that in criminal cases handled by me, it is never the obvious solution that is the correct one. The mere fact that the finger of suspicion is made to point at a certain individual is sufficient to absolve that individual from guilt. Had you read the little works of my friend and colleague here, Dr. Watson, you would not have made such a mistake. Yet you claim to be a bookman.
Oh, no.
Well, to continue, however. There, at Mr. Edwards' own back door, you ended your trail, entering his house, his own house, and spending the night under his roof, while his cries and ravings over the loss filled the night and brought joy to your unspeakable soul. And in the morning, when he had gone forth to consult me, you quietly left, you and Miles, and returned to your own place by the beaten highway.
Oh, mercy. If this is made public, I will be ruined. I was driven to it. I could not let Mr. Edwards examine the book, for exposure would follow that way. And yet I could not refuse him, my best friend, when he asked its loan.
Your words tell me all I did not know. The motive now is only too plain.
It was a forgery.
Just so, Watson. The work, sir, was a forgery, and knowing that your erudite friend would discover it, you chose to blacken his name to save your own. I take it the book was insured.
Oh, yes, insured for £350,000. He told me.
He planned at once to dispose of this dangerous and dubious item and to reap a golden reward. Come, sir, tell us about it. How much of it was forgery? Merely the inscription?
I will tell you all, and throw myself upon the mercy of my friend, Mr. Edwards. The whole book, in effect, was a forgery. It was originally made up of 2 imperfect copies of the 1604 quarto. Now, out of the pair, I made 1 perfect volume, and a skillful workman, now dead, changed the date for me so cleverly that only an expert of the first water could have detected it. Now, such an expert, however, is Mr. Harrington Edwards, the one man in the world who could have unmasked me.
Thank you, Nathaniel.
The inscription, of course, also was forged. You may as well know all.
And the book, where did you destroy it?
It is even now burning in Mr. Edwards' own furnace.
Then it cannot yet be consumed.
Holmes dashed into the basement. He was absent for some little time. All the while we heard a most awful noise. He finally emerged in high spirits, carrying a charred leaf in his hands.
It is a pity. In spite of its questionable authenticity, it was a noble specimen. It is only half consumed, but let it burn anyway. I have preserved 1 leaf as a souvenir of the occasion. Mr. Harrington Edwards, I fancy the decision in this matter is for you to announce. Sir Nathaniel, of course, must make no effort to collect the insurance.
I promise that.
Well, let us forget it then. Let it be a sealed chapter in the history of bibliomania. I forgive you, Nathaniel.
Oh, my good friend. Thank you. I am sorry. So sorry.
Their hands met. Tears stood in the baronet's eyes. Holmes and I turned from the affecting scene, powerfully moved. We crept to the door unnoticed. In a moment, the free air was blowing on our temples, and we were coughing the dust from the library from our lungs.
They are strange people, these book collectors.
My only regret is that I shall be unable to publish my notes on this interesting case.
Wait a bit, my dear doctor, and it will be possible. In time, both of them will come to look upon it as a hugely diverting episode, and will tell it upon themselves. Then your notes will be brought forth, and the history of another Mr. Sherlock Holmes' little problems shall be given to the world.
It will always be a reflection upon Sir Nathaniel.
He will glory in it. He will go down in bookish chronicle with Chatterton and Ireland and Payne Collier. Mark my words, he is not blind even now to the chance this gives him for sinister immortality. He will be the first to tell it.
But why did you preserve the leaf from Hamlet? Why not a jewel from the binding?
A fancy to preserve so accurate a characterization of either of our friends. The line is a real jewel. See, the good Polonius says, that he is mad, 'tis true. 'Tis true, 'tis pity, it is true. There is as much sense in Master Will as in Hippias or Confucius, and a greater felicity of expression. Here is London, and now, my dear Watson, if we hasten, we shall be just in time for Zabriskie's matinee. We hope you enjoyed the first part of this evening's program. And now, here is a word from our sponsor. Has Brian come in yet?
No, I don't want to read the part of Sherlock Holmes be here.
To do it.
I don't want to.
It's in your contract.
Well, he's still not here, and I just don't know what happened. He has just disappeared.
I'm sure everything's fine.
Well, if Brian isn't hiding from Meg, I'm sure I know the answer. I've been thinking about it.
What is it?
Well,
Tell us about it.
Well, in the words that our good friend Sherlock Holmes might use, it's absurdly simple, my dears. He went into a bar and disappeared. He's obviously on a bender. It's happened before, you know.
No, I don't believe it. He's been sober 3 years. And I went into the bar, he wasn't there.
You see, but you do not observe. It's certain that he was in the gents.
Well, there's nothing else we can do. I've already doubled up all the roles. Liz, it's up to you.
I run my director.
I can take the role if Liz doesn't want to. I mean, it'll be a little awkward, but...
I'm here! Just made it! What happened? Were you kidnapped? Well, thank goodness you're here.
Yes.
All right now, everybody, gather round.
Oh, God.
We return now to the second part of this evening's performance with Yes, Virginia, There Is a Sherlock Holmes. But first, let us hear a few more jingles.
Are you in search of that fizzy refreshment?
Pepsi Cola hits the spot.
12 full ounces, that's a lot.
Twice as much for a nickel, too. Pepsi Cola is a drink for you. Achy feet at the end of the day? Try Buster Brown's shoes.
Does your shoe have a boy inside?
What a funny place for a boy to hide.
Does your shoe have a dog there too?
A boy and a dog and a foot in a shoe. Well, the boy is Buster Brown and the dog is Tiger's friend. They're really just a picture, but it's fun to play pretend. So look, look, look in the telephone book for the store that sells the shoes, with a picture of a boy and a dog inside that you can put your foot into.
Buster Brown shoes.
Want to brighten your smile? Billy Brown, the smoothest, schoolest guy in town. The chicks all seem to dig my jive.
Tell the other guys, Phil, how can they arrive?
It's easy, yeah, any gal gets set when you flash your smile by Pepsodent. You'll wonder where the yellow went when you brush your teeth with Pepsodent.
Wow. I really love to hear those singers. But back to our final program for today. Derek Belanger, the writer of our next pastiche, is an avid Sherlockian and the owner, along with his brother Brian, of Belanger Books, one of the world's most prominent Sherlock Holmes publishers. The play, of course, invokes one of the most famous newspaper editorials ever published, Francis Church's answer to 8-year-old Virginia O'Hanlon's letter in 1897, asking if Santa Claus was real. And by the way, Brian Belanger is in the cast tonight, as, who else? Sherlock Holmes. Brian will also be playing Marty and Mendelssohn.
Elementary.
Also in the cast, we have Peggy Ray Johnson as the omniscient narrator.
Bonjour, mon ami.
John McMahon as Bert Provencher.
Good evening.
Tom Bernstock plays David.
Good evening.
Eric Bell plays Sully and Cecil.
I am so glad you're with us.
Meg Kupiec plays Virginia, Agnes, and the young lady.
Hello.
And our own Liz Pannerton plays Clyde.
Hi there.
And our own Ren Doyle plays Peter.
Hello.
And the stage manager. We hope you will enjoy the show.
In 1929, speakeasies were America's unique answer to prohibition. All kinds of people went there, including a lot of roughnecks. We had them in Manchester, New Hampshire, too. The one I'm talking about was called Sully's Place. Sully himself was the bartender, and he kept a tight rein on what went on in his place, what with being constantly worried that the police might bust in at any time. Well, I want to tell you a story about an extraordinary thing that happened there one day.
Cheers, man. How's it going? Hey, Brian was really good, yeah.
It all started with Bert Preventure and a little girl. Bert was a regular. Everybody knew him. A postman, a talker, lifelong bachelor with more money than he needed, and always glad to buy a round for those who would join him in talking about his favorite subjects, which ran to unions,
Best damn thing that ever happened to this country.
politics,
Harding only got in because of the women voting.
Manchester,
Our blessed mill town.
sports,
Red Sox will clobber them Yankees this year.
war.
After the Great War, this ain't never gonna happen again.
Well, you get the idea. On this particular day, among the clientele was a man with his 10-year-old daughter. He was deep in his cups. David was his name. Her name was Virginia. They weren't our usual customer, although they had been in once or twice before, and it was kind of surprising to see them there. David looked sullen, unkempt, disheveled. And the girl kept looking at her dad, worried about him. Well, Bert noticed them and walked right over to them at the bar.
I say, Sully, what's with those two? Why is he bringing that little girl in here? She should be in school, shouldn't she? Or out playing somewhere, having fun.
Yeah, it's too bad. The word is that her mother died about 2 months ago. That's what he says, but confidentially. Mind you, there's something fishy about it all. There was no funeral. The rumor is she ain't dead at all. But she run away with the Iceman, Mr. Spyback, who ain't been seen around here since the mother supposedly died. Since then, David's been taking a drink. Never touched the stuff before.
Poor kid.
Yeah, she's bright, too. Always reading.
Yeah, I noticed the book she's reading. The Adventures of Sherlock Holmes by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. I wonder. I think I'll go talk to them. Sherlock Holmes saved my life. Maybe I can do the same thing for theirs. Excuse me, miss, but I couldn't help noticing you're reading about the great detective Sherlock Holmes. I met him once, you know.
I don't see how you could have. He isn't real.
Well, you're wrong there, my dear. He's as real as you and me. Sharpest man in the world. Look like a hawk, just like it says in the stories.
Now, don't you go bothering the family, Bert. Let the man drink in peace.
There ain't no Sherlock Holmes, you old fool. He's made up. Never lived in real life, see? See what it says right here. Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, right there on the spine in gold. He's the author of the books. These ain't real.
Nonsense, I met the man. Look, just the way they draw him in Collier's Weekly. You see, we're supposed to know the man's real. It's a disguise.
I think you're wrong, mister. He's not real.
But don't you see? What better disguise could he have than pretending to be fiction? Then he can do his detective work without anyone suspecting.
Oh, I didn't think of that. Really?
Really? He explained the whole thing to me on a crowded street corner in New York.
By this time, the conversation had got the attention of the room, even from Marty and Clyde, two of the regulars, who had paused in their game of darts to take a few swigs of ale and listen.
Say, didn't he die?
Oh, great. Now we got two brains joining us that think he's a real person. The books are fake.
I tell you, there is a Sherlock Holmes. I met the man once. He saved my life. It's why I wear a uniform instead of spending my days behind bars.
Ah, go on with you. The man don't exist.
I say he's real, and I'll convince you if you give me a chance to talk. In fact, I'm willing to make David here a wager.
Don't got no money for a wager.
You misunderstand me, sir. Not like that. It's like this. I'll prove to you that I met Mr. Sherlock Holmes in the flesh. If you think my story is a bunch of malarkey, then I will buy you all a round.
Ooh.
No, make it 2 rounds for your time and trouble.
All right. And if you win?
Then this little girl here, she gets an afternoon of fun. Take her to the amusement park or just go for a stroll. Maybe get her the next collection of Sherlock Holmes stories. Yeah, that would be most appropriate. Most appropriate indeed. You'd like that, wouldn't you, miss?
Yes.
So, what do you say?
All right, mister, but no tricks.
None coming, sir. I am true to my word. Isn't that right, Sully?
Yeah. You do like to spread your money around the bar for anyone that'll give a listen to your rambling tales. But David's right. No tricks. And just so you knows, I don't like this.
All this while, the girl was nervously looking up at all these men hovering over her, and I dare say, feeling somewhat uncomfortable at all this newfound attention.
And you, my dear, no need to be afraid.
I'm not afraid.
Good. That book you're holding, a good chunk of that is fiction, I admit. For what better way to hide one's identity than to come off as a fictional character? No one would look for you in real life.
That's so, mister, and that's really clever of him.
You bet it is. And from what I've learned from men far more learned than myself, Dr. Watson is also a real man in the flesh, though I can't say I ever met him. Sir Arthur Conan Doyle acts as his literary agent and puts his name on the stories again, so no one will believe there's any part of the story that's real.
Oh, come on. You know you're just pulling our leg.
No, sir. Just look around you and you can see the influence of Sherlock Holmes everywhere. That's because of the work he does.
Nah, that's a lot of hooey.
I tell you, it's true. Why, just look at the advances in police work. They don't fall over each other, messing up crime scenes and arresting someone just for standing outside a home where a robbery occurs. No, sir. They check for fingerprints and footprints. That's all because of Holmes. And look at the changes in technology since that detective started working. Look at the advancements in transportation.
Oh, that's true, yeah.
No more horse-drawn carriages on the road. It's all automobiles and aeroplanes in the sky. I bet Holmes and his brother Mycroft, he works for the British government if you didn't know, they had something to do with all that.
I suppose now you'll say Holmes has visited the moon and brought you a sample of green cheese.
Say what you like, Sully, but you still haven't heard my tale and my wager still stands.
Well, get on with it then.
All right, I will. It all began a long time ago. Close to 30 years now, I think on it. I wasn't a respectable mailman then, no sirree. I was a huckster, a charlatan, a man who made his living tricking the meek-minded of the world.
The more things change, the more they stay the same.
Laugh all you want, but I'm going to tell my tale. Just listen.
From then on, Bert was talking mainly to the girl, and when she finally looked up at him, he winked at her, and she responded with an ever so slight smile.
It was back in 1899. That's long before you were born, miss. I worked with a team of hucksters. The ringleader was Cecil Rhodes and his wife Agnes. Then there was Peter Briggs and Warren Mendelssohn.
Mendelssohn? Wasn't he that music fellow?
Well, it was spelled the same, but if there were relations, it must have been distant, for he had no musical skill whatever. Couldn't even whistle. Well, we started off around 1896 or so working as a team.
What did you do?
We had a street magician routine. We'd gather a crowd around us, and Cecil would saw Agnes in half. Wow. To the oohs and ahs of the spectators. While Warren and I made the audience's wallets disappear. That was very profitable for us for a while.
Yeah, they must have caught on eventually.
You're right, Clyde. After the cops caught on to us in Philly, we moved to Trenton with a new routine. Mendelssohn would take up the role of Professor Knowledge, the living encyclopedia. We had fun with that one. We'd spread ourselves out in the crowd and ask questions, and Mendelssohn would answer them. Of course, he'd been coached and knew all the questions and answers ahead of time. Then Cecil would make a bet and say he had a question he knew the professor couldn't answer. Other bets were placed. Of course, the professor would answer correctly, and the money would be spread among us all later.
And how long did you get away with that?
Well, like any team, after a while we figured we'd been in the small time long enough, and we're ready for the big time. We moved to New York, the biggest city of them all. And for New York, we needed a routine as big as the lights in New York.
Yeah, what'd you come up with?
By now, the whole bar was roped into Bert's tail, even if they still knew that it was quite tall.
Well, now this is where Sherlock Holmes comes in. It was my idea. You see, I noticed that Cecil stood over 6 feet tall, his body a bit on the thin side, and his nose a bit on the long side. His eyes were blue, and he had a rugged face, and no one would consider hawkish, but I knew he would do.
Do for what?
Why, to play the greatest detective of all time, Mr. Sherlock Holmes. Sherlock was all the rage just then. Everybody knew about him. All we would need was a deerstalker and a matching Inverness cape, and any fool on the street would think he was the real deal.
But just because someone looks like Sherlock Holmes don't mean he will think he's Sherlock Holmes.
Yeah, Dope's right. What was your plan?
And when Sherlock Holmes show up, you did say the real one's part of your story.
Gentlemen, let me tell my tale. The young lady is going to get lost with you always interrupting me.
All right. Get on with your story. So what was your plan?
Well, it went like this. Cecil would dress as Holmes. He'd come along into a crowded street. I can see it like it was yesterday. And I would yell out. It's him. It's Sherlock Holmes.
What?
Where? What?
You are quite right. I am Sherlock Holmes, and I'm working on an important case here in America, and hope to solve it soon and return to London.
Ah, you ain't Sherlock Holmes at all. You're just pretending.
Why, Warren, you don't know anything. Of course it's him.
I don't believe it. He ain't Sherlock. No way.
Yes, he is. He looks just like him.
All right, I'll prove it to you. Sherlock Holmes is noted for his powers of deduction. If he is Holmes, he should be able to tell us everything about any person in the crowd.
Yeah, would you bet on it? Hey, if this person is really Holmes, would he be dressed like this in America? Sherlock Holmes ain't a real person.
That's right. How could he be real? Anybody want to bet this guy ain't Sherlock?
Yeah, right. Anybody want to bet? Hey, if he can't tell anything about a person in the crowd, you win.
I'll take 5.
Okay. I agree, but I shall choose who will be the person Holmes analyzes.
Well, all right, but no tricks now.
I choose this young lady.
Me?
Come on over here, miss.
Me? Oh my.
Ah, yes. Let me see. This young lady is, a servant in a great house. Her parents are both dead, I'm sorry to say. She has a brother in prison, alas, for stealing. She has a young man that her employers do not approve of, and has taken the afternoon off to meet him. They are planning to run away together. Is that right, miss?
Yes, it's all true. God help me, Mr. Holmes. Don't tell me, Masters.
No, my dear. It's quite all right. You are safe with me. Good luck to you.
Yeah, you must have made it up. No, I don't believe it.
No, you're just bad losers. Now, let me tell you about these two gentlemen.
Huh?
This one, by the looks of him, has just gotten out of jail. Just as a point of curiosity, what were you in for? I would guess stealing.
He's got your number, Peter. That's right. I was there when they arrested him.
Why, you scoundrel. You don't know nothing.
And this one, well, I can see that he's not averse to blackmail.
What?
No doubt, he's made a tidy little sum at it. And moreover, he's a bigamist.
What? It's not true. It's not. No, he's been listening to lies from that one.
Go away.
No.
Oh, well, you gotta admit he knows what he's about. Why, mister, I believe you are Sherlock Holmes, sure enough.
So Cecil as Holmes would then say his goodbyes. And I would collect the money from all the bets. And then we would go to our separate ways to the rendezvous point to divvy up the cash.
Pretty neat scheme.
Yeah, the beauty of it is that there would be a good number in the crowd that would never think that Cecil was Holmes, even after he won. But that group would still think he had somehow deduced the facts about Peter and Mendelssohn from his expertise, and therefore, even if he wasn't Holmes, he still had a gift of his powers of observation. Then there'd be an even smaller group that we had hoodwinked that would know in their hearts that they had been swindled. But they'd never figure out how they were swindled. And in the end, they'd let it go for the sheer fun of being outsmarted.
They were lucky.
Then there might be one or two who'd be downright angry. That's why we'd need to vamoose the minute the charade ended so we could count our money away from any eye of the law.
That's a pretty rotten trick.
All eyes were now on Virginia, who was clenching her book and shaking with anger, because Virginia saw that her father, as he listened to Bert, was becoming visibly depressed. And she knew, with that intuition that kids thrust too soon into an adult role have, that he was thinking about how he had been duped by her mom, and that he was not happy about being duped.
That it was, my dear. I was rotten to the core. I was no more than a common thief who didn't care a straw about the people I was robbing. But that's why you must hear of my moment of salvation.
That I'd like to hear.
Well, there we were. We had rehearsed this scene many times, and we had worked together long enough to read each other's actions and know our cues. And now, on this one day, we were ready to do it again. We picked a busy section of Broadway and timed the performance just after the afternoon matinees let out.
Oh, good plan.
We knew there'd be a good crowd of folks around, heading to the restaurants and shops.
Makes sense.
Well, we stationed ourselves at the intersection of Broadway and 35th Street as a flood of people headed our way. Peter, Mendelssohn, Agnes, and I joined the crowd, and a block later, Cecil in costume came up the street walking against the foot traffic. Just picture it. I would call out, just like I always did.
Great show. Good job.
It's him. It's the great Sherlock Holmes himself.
What? That's crazy. He doesn't know what he's talking about.
Yeah, another nut.
It's him, I tell you. It's him. Gotta believe me.
It's not him. No way.
No way.
It's him.
He
No.
looks like
Then
Sherlock
suddenly,
Holmes, but maybe.
Bert stopped, stupefied. A tall gentleman in a dark blue pinstripe suit and derby hat appeared at the edge of the crowd.
Look there. Look at the hawkish nose and the piercing eyes. He's the one. He really is Sherlock. Look how he's staring at Cecil.
Gentlemen, please. I am happy to show an offering of my skills.
I bet you are, and I got $5 says you ain't nothing but a fraud.
Yeah, and here's $5 says that he's the real thing.
Yeah, that was good.
Oh, bravo! Bravo! This is quite the performance. I dare say we can all save our money from purchasing theater tickets when you've given us a wonderful show right in the middle of the sidewalk.
How dare you, sir? I tell you, I am indeed the real Sherlock Holmes, and I can prove it.
Prove it? I should hope so, my good man. I long to see your proof. Now, let me see. If you are Sherlock Holmes, you should be able to deduce characteristics of anyone in this crowd. Am I correct?
Oh, indeed. And so I shall. Here, sir. This gentleman here, what do you think? Since you also doubt my capabilities, Is there someone in this crowd you'd like me to analyze?
I do believe that I should be the one to pick a subject from the audience. After all, these two gentlemen seemed a bit theatrical in their argument. However, if you are, as you say, the real Sherlock Holmes, you should have no issue if I choose, say, this elegant young lady. What do you say, miss? Would you do us the honor?
Oh, yes, sir.
Now, sir, would you have any objections to telling me a bit about this young woman?
Oh.
I will make it easy for you, Mr. Holmes. I will ask you to answer 3 questions about the lady.
All right. What are the questions?
Nothing too difficult. First, what is the social class of the young lady? Second, is she married? And third, is she with child?
What?
That's not much of a challenge, sir. Tell you what, though. Let this supposed Sherlock Holmes answer your questions, and then I'll have a real test for him.
Oh, I eagerly await your answers.
Very good, sir. In answer to your first question, this lady is clearly of the upper classes.
Oh, dear.
Her dress is of fine material and probably cost her parents a good deal of money.
But parents?
Of course. The woman is clearly living at home. She has no ring on her finger, so she is not married. As for your final question, I take some issue, sir. To accuse a fair young creature of having a child out of wedlock shows you are of a rather low moral character.
My dear man, I believe you and everyone else here will find that I am just a humble man who has learned to pay attention to fine details. Now, my dear, may I explain to the crowd how this, shall we say, actor is wrong on all counts?
Oh, yes, certainly, sir.
Very good. Let me go in reverse order of my questions, starting with the one you find so objectionable, sir. Although this young woman is not obviously showing, the way she carries herself, with her hand constantly covering her belly as if protecting it, indicates, as all mothers know, a woman with child.
No, wait a bit.
Second, the edema or swelling of her fingers due to her pregnancy, it makes it difficult for this young lady to keep her wedding ring on her finger. Though if this fraudulent Holmes had taken a close look at the woman's left ring finger, would you mind terribly, my dear?
Oh, no, sir, not at all.
As you can see, this young lady's ring finger clearly still has a faint line indicating where her wedding ring used to be worn and where she will in time wear her ring again. Am I correct, Mrs.
Hudson, Mrs. Hudson.
Mrs. Hudson? How appropriate, my dear, how appropriate. Now, let me explain to this actor my last deduction. You were on your way to meet your husband for dinner, but with the time being early, you decided to stop and see what the commotion was in this crowd.
Yes, that's correct, sir.
Very good, my dear. Now, from your dress, I'm going to surmise that your husband works for a respectable industry, yet he is young and is not yet settled in his career.
Right again, sir. He assists as a bookkeeper at a few of the theaters. He has built up a sufficient client base to make a respectable living.
Very good. So the dress you are wearing would be a huge extravagance for you to purchase yourself. Therefore, you borrowed it from a friend to impress your husband. That is why you wanted to meet him early, to make a showing of yourself at his place of employment and turn a few heads. Am I correct?
Oh, yes, sir, on all counts.
Thank you. Now, ladies and gentlemen, you have probably already concluded that my partner here and I are vaudevillian performers. Our show opens in Boston next month, but of course, our dream is to perform on Broadway. We felt this was a good start. Thank you all for being such a delightful audience.
Hey, so what's the big idea? You stole our show.
On the contrary, I believe I just saved you from making a grave error. For I did notice that one man in the crowd, though he was now in civilian clothing, was an officer of the law. Had you gone on with your routine, you all would have ended up in prison. Now be off with you. And I suggest you find a better act than to imitate my poor self, the great Sherlock Holmes.
This was your idea, Bert.
We'll deal with you when we meet at the room back on Bleecker.
Come on, let's go.
Well, they all left but me. I stood a moment at the intersection trying to capture in my mind all that had happened. And suddenly, I felt a tight grip on my left shoulder and turned to face the man responsible for my failure, Mr. Sherlock Holmes.
I did what I had to do, Bert. I saved both your group from being arrested and the audience from being robbed. But that is not why I wanted to approach you. You, sir, have a gift. You knew who I was from the minute I entered the crowd, and you tried to warn the others. You don't just see, but you observe, and I believe you have a great number of questions for me.
You really are Sherlock Holmes. I knew it the minute I saw you. You're right, I did try to warn them, but they don't know their eyes from their elbows sometimes. So there is really a Dr. Watson? And you are a friend of Sir Arthur Conan Doyle? And your housekeeper is Mrs. Hudson, just like the young lady's name? That's why you laughed?
Yes, that's right. Now, you know, Bert, this life of crime of yours, it won't do for you. You have astute powers of observation, and I believe the New York police could use a hand in that department. Something to think on, yes?
Yes, sir. You have made me see a true thing, and I am going to mend my ways starting this very day.
Good afternoon to you, then.
So we shook hands, and then Sherlock Holmes wandered away, whistling a jingle, a bit of a lilt in his stride.
By this time, Bert's audience was so captivated by his story that there was complete silence when he finished.
But you ain't no cop.
Indeed, Clyde, I am not. But would you believe I was?
What about the rest of the gang? What did you say to them?
I never went to the rendezvous point that afternoon. Instead, I went straight to the closest police station, implied to be an officer of the law. Wow. By the end of the week, I was walking a beat. I did that for 2 years until the weight of the department's internal corruption weighed too heavily on my shoulders. Never wanted to keep my mouth shut. I lashed out at the graft I witnessed. Finally, while stopping a mugging, my left hand got smashed by the crook. Though my hand would clear up, my commanding officer finally found a reason to sack me. My days walking a beat were over.
What did you do then?
Well, it was just around that time that I got a letter from my cousin saying that the Manchester Postal Service was hiring. So I became a postman. And that was what I did till I retired. So you see, Virginia, there is a real Sherlock Holmes. And as I said, he saved my life. Perhaps, my good friends, you can take a piece of my story and apply it to your own. Perhaps Mr. Holmes can save you too.
Well, what do you know? So Sherlock Holmes is real as any of us. You win your bet, friend. Come on, Virginia, we can catch the bus to Pine Island.
Yippee! Thanks, mister.
That's a real good thing you did for her. A real right thing.
Yeah.
I only did what I had to do. It was what Sherlock Holmes would have done had he been here. Now, after all that talking, my lips are parched. How about a drink?
Coming right up.
Yeah, it's on us.
Woohoo! Bert Prevention never knew where Sherlock Holmes had gone after he left him that day so many years ago. But I know. He went to the Garrick Theater on West 35th Street. As he entered, he met a frantic stage manager.
Oh, there you are. 5 minutes till curtain, Mr. Gillette.
you have enjoyed our evening of Sherlock Holmes pastiches. This program will be repeated tomorrow afternoon at 2 p.m. We invite you to tune in if you would like to hear these pastiches again, or tell your friends who may have missed this evening's performance. And if you missed part 1 of our program, tune in Sunday afternoon when WEDG will air our first 2 Sherlock Holmes pastiches, The Adventures of the Late Mr. Faversham by August Derleth, and Sherlock Holmes Goes West, our adaptation of Mark Twain's story, a double-barreled detective. Thank you for listening, and WEDG bids you good evening. Finally, I need a drink.
Well, we finally pulled it off.
Thank
Yep,
goodness.
got it done.
Hey, who was this Gillette guy? I mean, was he the razor guy?
No. He used to play Sherlock Holmes on stage before Basil Rathbone.
Now I remember, he would go around the country with his group. He made a bundle.
Hey, Brian, you gotta tell us though, what happened to you?
Yeah, our Sherlock here had us thinking you fell off the wagon again.
You'll never believe it. I hit it, guys. I hit it.
Really? What?
Yeah. Hit what? Silver Blaze at the track! Just 20-1 odds! I had a feeling. I just had a feeling, you know. And I was right.
I knew I should have taken that bet.
But Brian, where were you? I mean, I saw you go into the speckled band, and I followed you there, but I couldn't find you.
You were following me, though? Well, you didn't see me because I was on the phone, in the phone booth where they keep the phone. I was talking to my bookie on the phone. Hey, everybody, let's all go to the speckled band for drinks, okay? On me!
Oh,
That's
a big shot.
No, just Coca-Cola for me.
Congratulations.
Thanks.
I'm in. Let's go, Sherlock.
Yeah, I'll be right there. Yep, save me a spot. Yep, be right there. Gotta clean up, do my taxes, build a canoe. So you were following me, huh? Well.
Well, I wouldn't exactly call it following. I mean, you went to that place, and then I had to go to that same place at a different time, but just sort of after you. But, so it wasn't really following, I just had to get to that same place too. But if I were following you, I probably would have told you how cute you are in that hat.
Come on, man. Walk with me.